You know, most people think they can predict how you'll react. They build a script in their head, and they expect you to follow it, line for line. My wife, Sarah, she had her script perfectly memorized. It was a classic, really. The dramatic fight, the tearful ultimatum, the husband crumbling, begging for forgiveness, promising to change. She'd played this scene out in her mind a dozen times, and she was ready for her Oscar-winning performance. But see, she never bothered to check if I'd learned my lines. Because on the night she finally shouted, "I'm packing my bags, I'm leaving you," she expected me to beg. I did something else entirely. I helped her pack. It didn't start that night. The cracks had been forming for years, tiny fissures we both pretended not to see. We lived in a beautiful house, the kind with a perfectly manicured lawn and a welcoming porch swing. From the outside, it was a postcard. But inside, the silence was deafening. We'd become experts in parallel living, sharing a space, a bed, a life, but never truly connecting. Conversations were about logistics, bills, groceries, whose turn it was to take out the trash. The warmth, the laughter, the late-night talks about everything and nothing, then had all faded, like an old photograph left in the sun. And then there was the criticism. It started small, little comments about how I loaded the dishwasher wrong, or drove too slowly, or didn't fold the towels the correct way. But over time, it became a constant, low-frequency hum in the background of our lives. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough. I felt myself shrinking, trying to become smaller, quieter, less me, just to avoid the next pointed remark. I was walking on eggshells in my own home, and I was exhausted. The final act began on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. I came home from work, tired but content, and made us dinner. I remember it was her favorite, lasagna, with the garlic bread she likes. I lit a candle, thinking maybe, just maybe, we could break the cycle. She came home, dropped her bag, and her eyes scanned the room. They didn't land on the meal, or the candle, or my hopeful smile. They landed on a single water glass I'd left on the coffee table that morning. And that was it. The catalyst. A $2 glass. The criticism started, but this time it was different. It was sharper, more venomous. It wasn't about the glass anymore, it was about my inherent laziness, my lack of consideration, my failure as a partner. I stood there, taking it, as I always did. But something inside me had gone cold. It was a quiet, solid feeling, like a stone settling at the bottom of a river. I was just done. She stormed into our bedroom, and I heard the closet door slam open. I followed her, leaning against the doorframe, watching as she haphazardly threw dresses and shoes into a large suitcase. Her movements were frantic, theatrical. She was waiting for me to interrupt, to grab her arm, to fall to my knees. This was the climax of her script. She turned to me, tears of rage in her eyes, and delivered her line with practiced precision. "That's it. I'm done. I'm leaving you. I can't do this anymore." The old me would have panicked. The old me would have promised the moon. But the old me was gone. I just looked at her, my face a calm mask. "Okay," I said, my voice eerily steady. "Let me help you." Her jaw actually dropped. The script was in tatters. I walked calmly to the closet, pulled down another suitcase, and started methodically folding her sweaters, placing them neatly inside. The silence in the room was louder than any shouting. She was frozen, utterly bewildered. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the villain, and she the long-suffering heroine. I was refusing my role. I zipped up the second suitcase and carried both to the front door. She followed me, a stunned puppet. I opened the door, set the luggage on the porch, and then, without a word, I looked at her. It wasn't a look of anger. It was a look of finality. She stared back, a mixture of confusion and dawning horror on her face. She took a hesitant step towards the door, perhaps thinking I was bluffing. That's when I closed the door. And I turned the deadbolt. The click of that lock echoed through the house like a gunshot. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a timid knock. James? This isn't funny. Another knock, harder this time. James, open this door. Then, it escalated to pounding. Fists hammering against the solid wood. James, open the door right now. You can't do this. Her shouts turned from anger to something else, something raw and desperate. But the stone inside me didn't budge. I stood there, on the other side of the door, and I simply waited. The pounding eventually subsided. I heard a sound I'd never heard from her before, a broken, defeated sob. Then, silence. A few minutes later, I heard her car start and drive away. The quiet that settled over the house was different this time. It wasn't the silence of loneliness or tension. It was a peaceful, profound silence. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt free. The next few days were a whirlwind of her trying to regain control. The phone call started, first angry and accusatory, then pleading, then finally, from her lawyer. But I was ready. I'd been mentally preparing for this for a long time. I hired my own lawyer, a pit bull of a woman who saw right through the theatrics. We didn't fight dirty, we just didn't play the game. We presented the facts, the financial records, the evidence of a marriage that had been dead long before I locked that door. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes. Just signatures on a page and the quiet closing of a chapter. That was 2 years ago. And the reason I'm telling you this story now is because of what happened just last week. I was in a coffee shop, reading a book, when I saw her. Sarah. She was with a friend at a table across the room. She looked older. Tired. The friend was talking animatedly, but Sarah's eyes were darting around the room, critical, dissatisfied. I saw her lean in and say something to her friend, and I watched the friend's face fall, the light in her eyes dim just a little. It was a look I knew all too well. And in that moment, I didn't feel anger, or resentment, or even pity. I felt a deep, unshakable certainty. That night, when I turned the lock, I wasn't just locking her out of a house. I was locking myself out of a prison. I had taken back my life, my peace, my sense of self. Her shout of "I'm leaving you" was meant to be a punishment, a final blow to my ego. But she handed me the key to my own freedom, and I was finally brave enough to use it. She expected me to beg for her to stay. But the greatest power I ever found was in calmly, quietly letting her go.